Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. The past week with the We Charity debacle, I thought it would give us a bit of an opportunity just to have some points about ministerial responsibility. A lot of what has been going on has been a bit of a blame game between the Prime Minister and senior bureaucrats. The Prime Minister has claimed that it was the bureaucrats who decided that We was the only organization capable of delivering what they were asking them to for this Canada Service Grant. And then we also had one of the people who run We say that it was the PMO that reached out and then corrected himself and said no, it was actually from the department. And somewhat absent in this was the minister. Now, this is something that should have been tasked to the Minister of Youth, and she's also the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion, Bardish Chagger, but she was largely absent from any of this conversation, and that's a little weird because this is her file. And this is one of these things where people are trying to rope the Prime Minister into it directly, and I'm not sure that that was necessarily the best tactic to go about it. So it's one of these things where this is also where how to hold government to account also takes place. Now, the Conservatives have largely tried to do things like call the Auditor General in, which is a bit premature and also kind of a symptom of why they're looking to officers of Parliament to do their own homework. This should have been a job MPs themselves should have done. And in this case, because we have ministerial responsibility, these MPs should have called an emergency committee meeting and had summoned the minister and her deputy to the committee in order to explain the thinking process that went into how they came up with We as being the organization that was supposed to be able to run this program. For those of you who don't know how committees can operate during the summer when the House is normally not sitting, and generally they can do that by having an emergency meeting. How can you trigger an emergency meeting? A certain number of members of that committee can write to the chair, who will then bring them all in, or in this case, put them all in a Zoom call because that's how we're doing it. And then they can decide, do we need to hold hearings on whatever this issue is? The opposition can absolutely force the committee to come back because we are in a hung parliament and they have the majority of seats on the committee. So if the Conservatives are so concerned about it, they can get the NDP and the Bloc members to all join forces and have enough votes that they can force these meetings to happen. And because we have ministerial responsibility, we should be asking the minister and her deputy to account for what goes on or what went on. It's all past tense now because We has pulled out of the grant administration process entirely. And this is one of these lessons that we should remain focused on how things work and how accountability happens. It may be one of these things where they're trying to score points against the Prime Minister. Certainly with the Ethics Commissioner saying that he wants to take a look at it as well, that gives them kind of ammunition to do that. But I think it's going to be difficult for the Ethics Commissioner to find anything because nobody's private interests are actually being advanced in We being given that contract. Yes, the Prime Minister and his family have appeared at We events, but they did so voluntarily, donated their time, and more importantly, donated their profile to these events. And Andrew Scheer's been going on and saying how this is somehow enriching them, and how anytime he gets on a stage with thousands of young people, that's somehow an enrichment. But he's the Prime Minister. And before that, he had a certain amount of celebrity. So he wouldn't have actually needed the we stage. He could have simply called a press conference. The we stage, the whole point of, we bringing in celebrities to do that is for the cachet. And Trudeau being one of those celebrities. They've also got Idris Elba, for example, as someone who does these kinds of events with them. So trying to assert some kind of material benefit or reputational benefit, I think is dubious. We'll have to see what the ethics commissioner does end up saying. This particular commissioner has been known to essentially invent new definitions for terms in legislation that were not previously being used to interpret statutes. So that's a possibility that something might happen there, but suffice to say, this is a situation where the minister is ultimately responsible and should be the one who is being asked questions of. One other note here is that when we talk about ministerial responsibility, a lot of people seem to automatically think that means the minister must resign for anything that happens, and that's not true at all. Resignation for something is, yes, an ultimate consequence for something that gets, screwed up really badly. And absolutely a minister should, voluntarily resign if that's the case. But this is pretty small change in the grand scheme of things. And ministerial accountability can simply mean just that. It's accountability. It's them taking responsibility for what happened and ensuring that steps are taken or measures are put into place to avoid something like that happening again. But really, it's about ensuring that the responsibility for what the public service did rested on the minister. Because this is also the trade-off for when good work happens and ministers get thanked, and public servants, who did a lot of the work don't necessarily get thanked in the same way. It's kind of that trade-off for how government works in our system. So anyway, these are things we should be thinking about as this continues to roll along, because there's going to be demands for explanations, and with the ethics commissioner and so on. I don't think the story is going away anytime in the next few weeks. So let's just try and remember that there are people for whom we should be holding to account, and that is primarily going to be the minister. And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. It's at Cherno_Dale on Twitter. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.